Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to begin this evening's webinar with a bit of an introduction, and first wanted to welcome everyone on behalf of the ORSANCO Commission. My name is Richard Harrison, and I'm the Executive Director of ORSANCO, and with me as part of the presenters for the evening's webinar is Jason Heath, who is the Director of ORSANCO's Technical Programs. I will be providing some background information on really the Commission and how we really reached this point that is really the launch of our 2018 Pollution Control Standards update, and then we turn it over to Mr. Heath to talk about the details of the process. So first wanted to start with a little overview of the purpose of this public review, and I guess before I do that, just a little note that this evening's webinar will be recorded and will be posted on our website in roughly a week. It takes a little bit of time to process the recording and get it back so that we can get it up on the website. So back to the purpose of our public review. We are working to solicit input from the public on 5 alternatives that have been considered by the Commission for future implementation of the Commission's pollution control standards. As a highlight or overview, there are 5 alternatives, as I just mentioned, developed and considered by an ad hoc committee of ORSANCO, and I'll give a little bit of more information on the ad hoc committee in a slide or two. And then one of those alternatives has been expanded as the alternative that has been preferred by the majority of the commissioners. And also, as part of that document, we have included a minority report which provides some additional information and thoughts on not implementing alternative 2, looking at some of the other alternatives. We'll start off with just a little bit of an overview on ORSANCO. So who are we? ORSANCO was formed in 1948 through the signing of a compact by the governors of 8 states within the Ohio River Basin, and the compact was also approved or ratified by the United States Congress. We currently include the states of Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. So from those states, we have 3 commissioners, and there are also 3 federal commissioners appointed by the President of the United States that make up if you will, the ORSANCO Board of Directors or our commission. These are our policy decision makers. And the compact itself provides ORSANCO's mission and authorities centered around the control of interstate water pollution, and really primarily focusing on the maintenance of the designated uses for the interstate bodies of water within the compact district through our compact mission. Wanted to give a quick overview on some of ORSANCO's program areas. The current program area includes the pollution control standards, which we're going to be talking about tonight, and that's our regulatory area. We also have a very robust water quality monitoring and assessment program. We're very involved in spill detection and response, and really the whole broad source water protection program area. We work with Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Water Act coordination and implementation. We facilitate TMDLs. Work with our state partners and EPA through the NPDES permit process, as I mentioned before, source water protection and other areas. We're involved in applied research, many areas, but a couple highlights include pharmaceuticals, emerging contaminants, mercury, just to name a few. And then we have a public involvement program area working on volunteer monitoring, our river sweep cleanup program, and our mobile aquarium, as well as other communication through our website and social media. I'm going to provide some background, really stepping back, because this year's review is a little bit different than our last, what we would call a training review that took place and was ultimately culminated in October of 2015. That review really looked at a detailed review of each standard, which is for many reviews typical of our pollution control standards update. In this review, the Commission, as it has done a few times in its rich history, is really stepping back to conduct a more wholesale, in-depth review of our role, our broad role in water quality standards, if you will. We do these programmatic reviews not just with water quality standards, but all of our programs from time to time to help make sure that we are effectively using our limited resources in the most efficient way possible. And through this effort, the Commission sees potential merit by perhaps eliminating a third layer of standards while still protecting the Ohio River's designated use and uses based upon the rigorously developed scientific water quality standards that are currently being developed at the state and federal level. This current in-depth review really began with the appointment of a Commission ad hoc committee to review the Commission's role in water quality standards in June of 2015. An ad hoc committee is basically a committee that is appointed by the chairman of the Commission with a specific function. So this effort really began through that appointment. It has been a very lengthy and thorough discussion and evaluation by staff, our commissioners, and a number of committees that really help guide ORSANCO's programs. Through this detailed process, the ad hoc committee developed 5 alternatives to be considered by the Commission. Early on through this process, ORSANCO secured input from our various advisory committees and our technical committee that really helped enrich the process. The work of the ad hoc committee was then referred by the Commission to its Pollution Control Standards Committee to be utilized as part of the Commission's 2018 Pollution Control Standard Review process, which is really what just launched. And again, Jason Heath will be going into more detail on this, but it's really the public notice process really formed the launch of this on January the 10th. Through this lengthy process, it's clear to the Commission that looking at this broad review of ORSANCO's role in water quality standards is very complex, and we really need to do this in a thoughtful and transparent manner that provides substantial opportunity for public comment. And this is our second webinar. We hosted one, conducted one last Wednesday during the day, and this is all part of the process of outreach, trying to make sure that we communicate the process and what we're trying to accomplish with this review. And I do want to stress on behalf of the Commission that the initiation of this current review is really just beginning the 2018 Pollution Control Standards Review process, and no decision has been made by the Commission. Mr. Heath, I'm going to turn it over to Jason at this time. He'll go through more detail, really the protocols for comments and what's going to occur through the rest of this webinar. And again, thank you very much for your participation. Jason?
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jason Heath, and I will take us through the rest of this presentation, after which we will provide some time for question and answer. Just to let everyone know, all the participants are muted now, and what these procedures say is that if you have a question after the presentation concludes, you can type your question in the bottom left-hand corner. You'll see public chat, and you can type a question in there. I think with the number of participants we have on the line, that after we're done with the presentation, we'll take everyone off mute so that if you want to ask a question verbally, you can do so at that time. But if you would prefer, you can also type your question in the public chat box at the bottom, and we will answer the question. We just want to be clear that the purpose of this webinar is really to give folks an idea of what information we have out there, the resources available for you, and what the really a summary of what we're doing with this review. We don't want to use this presentation to accept comments. We want you to submit your comments in writing to us by mail or email by February 24th, and I'll go through the instructions on that a little bit later. But you can see at the bottom of this slide is ORSANCO's website, where you can find instructions for doing that, as well as all of the other resource materials. And we also have audio recorded the first webinar. We're also audio recording this webinar. We removed the question and answer session from that recording, but that recording will also be on our website. Moving along, just to give you a little background on ORSANCO's pollution control standards. You can find those on our website as well. The 2015 edition is the current standards revision, and really the meat of these standards are in 4 chapters. One of those is protection of designated uses, for aquatic life, contact recreation, public water supply, and fish consumption. And then we have specified water quality criteria, which generally numeric values for the protection of those designated uses. And then there's a section on mixing zone requirements, and then another section on wastewater discharge requirements, which are really requirements, into-pipe type requirements as opposed to in-stream criteria. Moving along, so what is the Commission considering? In essence, we are considering the future role of ORSANCO in pollution control standards, and really there are, as Richard said, there are 5 alternatives that are specific considerations for our future role. So the alternatives considered and additional resource materials. This is primarily just to let you know what is available on our website, and then after that I'll get into a little slightly more detail on the specifics of the 5 alternatives. But those 5 alternatives are on our website, and so we encourage everyone to go there and read those, because we'll just give a brief summary. And then the alternative number 2 is currently the preferred alternative by the Commission, and so there is an expanded write-up on that alternative. And then along with that, because although it's a preferred alternative, it's not unanimously preferred by all commissioners. So there is a minority position report that was developed by a number of commissioners that would like to see something different. Summary of comments from advisory committees and technical committee, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we had asked ORSANCO's advisory committees for input early in the process before we went to public review on this, and all of those comments are on our website, as well as there is a mock-up of our pollution control standards also on the website based on what we think the standards might look like should alternative number 2 be adopted at the end of this entire process. May or may not. There's no whether the standards ultimately end up looking like that. There will be further work done in that area should, in the event that alternative 2 would be selected. So to give you just a brief summary of each of the 5 alternatives, and again, we would recommend that you go to our website and read them to get a more thorough understanding of it. But the alternative number 1 was to altogether eliminate ORSANCO's standards and defer to the Clean Water Act and the state's water quality standards. Each of the states along the Ohio River has their own set of water quality standards, and so basically it would be deferring to that. In addition, U.S. EPA has national recommended water quality criteria, and so it would defer to those areas. Alternative number 2, which again is currently the preferred alternative by the Commission, would be to maintain the standards, but to eliminate Chapter 3 on water quality criteria. So we would that would be removing all of the criteria in Chapter 3, as well as the entirety of Chapter 4, which addresses mixing zones, and much of Chapter 5, which is the end-of-pipe wastewater discharge requirements. Alternative number 3, it would be to utilize U.S. EPA's national recommended water quality criteria as a starting point. So, in essence, we would maintain the Chapter 3 water quality criteria, but we would use U.S. EPA's national recommended criteria as a starting point, and then only deviate where scientifically appropriate. Sometimes there's scientific reasons why what EPA is recommending on a national basis might not be appropriate to the Ohio River, for instance. Alternative number 4, this is really an expansion of what ORSANCO is currently doing in pollution control standards. So it would be to maintain the standards as they are, but to work on increased harmonization of standards and implementation between the states. So the way the states, they would implement our standards through their permitting process. ORSANCO does not write the permits for the Ohio River. The states write the permits. So this would be basically an increased harmonization or uniformity between the states in how they utilize the criteria in their individual permitting processes for the Ohio River, for Ohio River discharges. And then alternative number 5 is to keep the standards basically as they are now, but to clarify, include some language that the standards are not mandatory by the states, but would be more similar to EPA's national recommended criteria, which are not mandatory as well, but they're recommendations. So that, in a nutshell, is the 5 alternatives. Again, we would encourage everyone to read through them in writing on our website. The expanded alternative number 2 and minority report, again, there are just additional details and background information on the preferred alternative number 2, and then right alongside of that is the minority report, which really provides some rationale for opposition to alternative number 2. And again, rather than go into much detail on that, we encourage you to read through it. I had mentioned earlier that early in the process, before we went to public comment, the Commission had asked its advisory committees and its technical committee to comment on the 5 alternatives. That was done in July of 17. You can see on this slide the list of advisory committees that ORSANCO has. They all submitted comments. Those are all summarized and on our website, so I will not go through those comments by any means, but please feel free to read through them. And then the mock-up of revised standards based on alternative number 2. Again, this is for illustrative purposes only to try to help you all as you are considering comments, to try to help you understand what the standards might look like should alternative number 2 be adopted in the future. And there's a marked up version so you can see what the current edition looks like, what would be removed, what would be added, and then there's a clean version as well. And in the end, should alternative number 2 be selected, we're not saying that's exactly what the standards would look like. There would be additional work done. So the schedule for this review, we made the announcement on January 10th. We had one informational webinar, just the same as this one, same presentation, all the information the same. That was last Wednesday at 3 p.m. And then, of course, this webinar that we're having tonight. Those are the 2 webinars. Again, comments are due on February 24th, after which ORSANCO staff will summarize those comments, provide them to our Pollution Control Standards Committee for their review and consideration. And then the Pollution Control Standards Committee may make a recommendation to the full Commission at its June meeting to continue with a second public review. If there's a recommendation to continue down this path, then that recommendation would be made to the Commission at their June meeting to hold a second public review. So we'll hold another one like this, but with more specifics as to more detail on what exactly is being recommended. And then we would also hold a formal hearing, more than likely at the Cincinnati Airport is normally where we hold these hearings. And we would do that as well before any final action was taken. And then should it continue on, there would be a final action by the Commission at its October 2018 Commission meeting. Just to give folks an idea of the public notifications we made, we have a email list of several thousand email addresses. We sent the public notice and press release out to all of those email addresses. We sent written postcards announcing the public review to all of the permitted discharges along the Ohio River. There was the press release and public notification was sent out to 120 or more media outlets in the basin. And then, of course, we have our website that is established to provide the resource materials. In addition, we have an email address dedicated to receiving comments. So, instructions on how to submit public comment. We want to receive your comments by February 24th. Instructions can be found on our website, but they are here as well. I think our preferred method would be to receive your comments by email to the email address pcs@orsanco.org. If you choose to use that method, please do not attach anything to the email. Put your comments in the body of the email. It just protects the security of ORSANCO's data management and email systems. If you would prefer to send your comments in writing, our mailing address is 5735 Kellogg Ave, Cincinnati, Ohio 45230, and that's acceptable as well. So, just again, today's comments will not be part of the official record. We want you to submit them in writing, and at the very bottom again is our web address. Now that concludes the presentation portion of this webinar. I am going to